The first thing she ever said to me wasn't hello. It wasn't thank you. It wasn't even my name. Standing on the front steps with 2 overloaded grocery bags slipping from her trembling hands, the elderly woman looked into my eyes with tears already forming and whispered, "You're the only man I've let inside this house in 23 years." The bags nearly fell to the ground, but I barely noticed. Something in her voice carried the weight of decades, the kind of pain that silently reshapes an entire life. In that single moment, I realized I hadn't just offered to help a neighbor carry groceries, I had unknowingly stepped toward a secret that had imprisoned a human heart for more than 2 decades. If you believe kindness can heal wounds that time cannot, please like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community that celebrates compassion, forgiveness, and second chances. My name is Grant Mercer, and until that afternoon, I believed I knew every face on our quiet street. Maple Ridge Lane was the kind of neighborhood where people smiled while mowing their lawns, waved from porches, and occasionally exchanged homemade pies during holidays. Yet there was one house everyone talked about without really knowing anything. It belonged to Eleanor Whitmore, a silver-haired widow who rarely stepped outside except to collect her mail or shop for groceries in the middle of the afternoon when the streets were nearly empty. Children had invented stories about the mysterious woman behind the lace curtains. Adults simply respected her privacy. I never thought much about it until the day I noticed her struggling across the parking lot of the local grocery store. She was trying to balance too many bags while leaning heavily on a cane. A gust of wind knocked one bag sideways, sending oranges rolling across the pavement. Without thinking, I hurried over, gathered the fruit, and offered to carry everything to her home. She hesitated so long that I assumed she would refuse. Then she looked into my face as if searching for someone she had lost years ago before quietly nodding. The walk back was slow, filled mostly with silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Sometimes kindness doesn't need conversation. When we reached her porch, she unlocked the front door with shaking fingers. Then came the sentence that stopped my heart. She said I was the only man she had allowed inside in 23 years. The inside of the house looked as though time itself had stopped. Every piece of furniture was spotless. Every photograph had been carefully dusted. Sunlight poured through old windows, illuminating shelves filled with books, porcelain birds, and framed family portraits. The house didn't feel abandoned. It felt preserved, like a memory refusing to fade. As I carried the groceries into the kitchen, I noticed one photograph sitting apart from all the others. It showed a smiling woman in her 20s standing beside a tall man with bright eyes and a little girl between them. The picture radiated happiness so naturally that it almost hurt to look at. Eleanor noticed me staring. She slowly picked up the frame and held it against her chest. She explained that the young woman was her daughter, Claire. The little girl was her granddaughter, Ivy. The man beside them was Claire's husband, Russell. Then her voice cracked. 23 years earlier, Russell had come home angry after losing his job. What began as another argument turned into violence. Claire tried to protect her daughter. Eleanor had arrived only minutes later after receiving a frightened phone call she never forgot. By the time emergency responders arrived, Claire was gone. Russell disappeared before police reached the house. He was eventually found hundreds of miles away and sentenced to prison, but nothing about justice repaired what had been broken. After the funeral, Eleanor raised Ivy alone until adulthood. Yet the trauma had carved a permanent wound into her soul. She could no longer bear having unfamiliar men inside her home. Delivery drivers left packages outside. Repair workers never crossed the doorway unless Ivy arranged everything while visiting. Even then, Eleanor would leave the house. "I've lived with fear longer than I lived without it," she admitted quietly. "I didn't know what to say. Sometimes there are no perfect words. So I simply unpacked her groceries, placed everything neatly in the pantry, fixed the loose handle on one kitchen cabinet without being asked, and wished her a peaceful afternoon. Before I left, she smiled. It was the smallest smile imaginable, but somehow it felt enormous. Over the following weeks, helping Eleanor became part of my routine. I trimmed her hedges during the day, repaired squeaky doors, replaced burned-out light bulbs, and brought over fresh vegetables whenever I harvested more than my small garden could produce. She always insisted on paying me, and I always refused. Eventually she stopped offering money and instead baked apple bread every Thursday morning, claiming neighbors should never keep score when kindness was involved. Little by little, the silence inside her home changed. Rooms once heavy with grief slowly filled with conversation. She told me stories about Claire's laughter, about Ivy chasing butterflies through the backyard, about family picnics beside the river. They weren't stories of tragedy anymore. They became stories of love that deserved to be remembered instead of hidden beneath sorrow. One sunny afternoon, Ivy came to visit. She was now a successful physical therapist living 2 towns away. She hugged her grandmother tightly before turning toward me with visible curiosity. When Eleanor explained that I had been helping around the house, Ivy's eyes filled with tears. She confessed that for years she had dreamed of seeing someone make her grandmother smile again. I thought she'd locked away the last joyful part of herself forever, she admitted. Hearing those words reminded me that healing rarely happens in dramatic moments. More often, it arrives quietly through countless ordinary acts repeated with patience. Summer passed into early autumn, neighbors noticed changes, the lace curtains were finally opened, flowers returned to the front porch, soft music drifted through open windows during bright afternoons, children walking home from school occasionally received homemade cookies, the mysterious widow slowly became simply Eleanor. But healing has a strange habit of testing itself. One afternoon, a county records officer arrived to discuss property boundary updates affecting several homes on the street. He was a polite young man, but the moment Eleanor saw a stranger approaching her front door, panic flooded her face. She froze, her breathing became uneven. Without thinking, I stepped beside her and gently explained everything while asking the officer to wait outside until she felt comfortable. He kindly agreed. After several long minutes, Eleanor steadied herself, then something remarkable happened. Instead of retreating inside, she walked back to the doorway herself. She invited the officer into the living room, not because she no longer remembered the past, but because she had finally begun believing the past didn't deserve complete control over her future. After he left, she sat quietly by the window. I almost let fear win again. She whispered that I reminded her that courage isn't the absence of fear, sometimes courage simply means opening the door anyway. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Months later, another unexpected letter arrived. Russell had been granted parole after serving his sentence. The news shook everyone, old memories resurfaced. Ivy worried constantly for her grandmother. Neighbors quietly offered support. Eleanor remained calm in a way none of us expected. Instead of hiding behind locked doors, she spent more time outside tending flowers beneath the warm afternoon sun. She explained something I would never forget. For 23 years I believed prison held 2 people, she said. One was the man who hurt my daughter. The other was me. Those words settled deep inside my heart. A week later, another letter appeared. Russell wanted to apologize, not because he expected forgiveness, not because he deserved it, simply because he had spent decades understanding the irreversible damage he caused. Eleanor read the letter several times before folding it carefully. She never replied. Instead, she visited Claire's grave with Ivy on a bright autumn afternoon. When they returned, Eleanor seemed lighter. She told us forgiveness wasn't always about reopening relationships. Sometimes forgiveness meant refusing to let hatred continue occupying space inside your heart. She wished Russell peace, but she also chose peace for herself. Life slowly settled into something beautiful. The house once known for silence became filled with laughter during neighborhood gatherings. Eleanor organized afternoon tea parties for nearby seniors who often felt lonely. Children loved listening to her stories beneath the old maple tree. Young couples sought her advice about marriage. Widowed neighbors found comfort in her gentle wisdom. Pain had not disappeared. It had simply transformed into compassion. One spring afternoon nearly a year after I first carried those groceries, Eleanor surprised the entire neighborhood. She announced she wanted to sell several antique collectibles and donate every dollar to establish a scholarship honoring Claire. The scholarship would support students pursuing careers helping victims of domestic violence rebuild their lives. People from across the county attended the fundraiser. Some donated antiques, others donated money. By sunset, enough funds had been raised to support multiple scholarships every year. Watching Eleanor smile while announcing the first recipients felt like witnessing sunrise after decades of darkness. As everyone prepared to leave, she asked if she could say one final thing. standing on her porch beneath the warm afternoon light. She looked toward me before addressing the crowd. She said the scholarship never would have existed if one ordinary neighbor had walked past instead of stopping to help with groceries. She reminded everyone that kindness often begins with moments so small we almost ignore them: holding a door, carrying a bag, listening without judgment, checking on someone who seems alone. That we rarely realize which tiny act becomes the turning point in another person's life. I stood speechless while neighbors applauded. Truthfully, I hadn't changed Eleanor's life alone. She had found the courage herself. That I had simply been present when she finally decided to open the door. Before this story comes to its close, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing a time when a simple act of kindness changed your life, or tell us what forgiveness means to you. Your words may encourage someone reading them today who desperately needs hope. Several years later, the scholarship continued growing, dozens of families found support through it, and Eleanor's once quiet home became the heart of the neighborhood. Every afternoon, sunlight poured through windows that had remained closed for decades, children laughed on the front lawn, neighbors stopped by with fresh bread or flowers, and visitors were welcomed with warm smiles instead of fearful silence. Every time I carried groceries through her front door, I remembered the sentence that had started everything. She had once believed I was the only man she could ever allow inside. In the end, she discovered something far more beautiful. She wasn't opening the door to strangers anymore. She was opening her heart to life again. And that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember, the smallest act of kindness you offer today may become the greatest blessing someone else carries for the rest of their life.